Hello! Let me quickly explain what you will need when you are just starting to learn soldering and PCB repair. First point, of course, it's a soldering iron. Don't start your experience with old uncontrolled soldering iron. Instead, look for soldering station where you can set the required temperature and change soldering iron tips. This is important because you will need to solder different alloys, lead and lead-free, and you will need to set different soldering temperatures. Different iron tips will also allow you to solder small components, as well as larger parts that absorb a lot of heat. If money is not a problem, buy soldering station from well-known manufacturers like Weller, JBC, Pace, Hakko or Metcall. Or you can use any inexpensive station from your marketplace. Later, you will look for something better anyway. Second point, a set of soldering iron tips. Cheap and expensive soldering stations have replacement tips. They differ by mounting type and are not interchangeable with other soldering station manufacturers. You will need to search on Google for the tip series that fits your exact soldering station. Expensive soldering stations usually comes with only one or two tips or cartridges. Any other tips shapes need to be ordered separately. Chinese manufacturers usually include a whole set of different tips, which is very convenient at the beginning. Third point, hot air. Many soldering stations have both soldering iron and hot air. Maybe you will not need hot air at the beginning, but later for PCB repair it will be very useful. Most ICs and electronic components are much easier to solder or replace with hot air. Point 4. Heat-resistant adhesive tape. You will definitely need heat-resistant adhesive tape when soldering or desoldering electronic components using hot air. Heat-resistant tape is required to protect plastic components, buttons and other parts from heat damage, ensuring that all surrounding components remain intact. Point 5. Tip cleaners. It's very important to clean the iron tip during soldering. For this, brass tip cleaner is used or a wet sponge soaked with water, which is often located in the soldering iron holder. What is better, brass tip cleaner or wet sponge? For me, brass tip cleaner is more convenient. It absorbs the remains of dirty or excess solder from the soldering iron tips better. Keep the hot soldering iron tips clean and turn off the soldering station if it does not have a sleep mode like expensive soldering stations do. Point 6. You will definitely need solder wick for removing excess solder. It is needed when you have to clean a plated through hole in print circuit board, remove excess solder from a contact pad or remove a solder bridge. This wick absorbs solder into itself, which is very convenient during work. Point 7. Tweezers, flash cutters, screwdrivers and a PCB holder. Without tweezers, it is inconvenient to work with small components. Look for tweezers with sharp tips. Flash cutters are needed to cut component leads and wires. A PCB holder is needed so the board does not move around on the table during soldering. Point 8. Solder. At the beginning, choose some solder from your marketplace. Most often it is from China, but for you this is enough. Try to find lead solder wire 0.8 mm with no clean resin core. Point 9. Soldering flux. Without flux at the soldering area, it is impossible to make molten solder flow properly, and the surfaces will not be clean from oxide films. You will need gel flux and liquid flux. I use Roll 0 no clean gel flux and syringe for any work, and I use Roll 0 no clean liquid flux only for wires. In reality, everyone uses them, however it is convenient. Point 10. Silicone soldering mat. It will protect your table from accidental burns. Small components are easy to see on it, and it looks more aesthetic. Later, the silicone mat can be replaced with an anti-static ESD mat and connected to ground through an ESD outlet. This will protect electronic components and print circuit boards from accidental static discharge from your hands. Point 11. Fume extractions. I'm really asking you, do not use the stop filters for smoke extractions. They don't save the surrounding air from soldering fumes. You need to make some kind of extractions from your table to the outside. Or I recommend floor standing solder fume extractions with airflow of at least 150 cubic meters per hour and proper filters. Point 12. If your budget allows it, I recommend getting a bottom preheater. This device will help you when you need to replace heavy components or ICs. Its job is to preheat the print circuit boards from the bottom, so the hot air or iron tip that you use to heat the PCB goes into melting the solder, not into heating the entire print circuit board. This greatly speeds up component replacement and soldering. At the same time, you will not heat the PCB for a long time and for no reason damaging the PCB laminate, components and traces. Finish point, microscope. You are unlikely to need a microscope when you're just starting out, but if you plan to improve the quality of your work, you will need to see the details on the print circuit boards more clearly. There is a huge variety of microscopes available, and it all depends on your budget. That's it. Right now you are ready to start your soldering experience. I have already recorded many videos that will also be useful for you. And if you have any questions, feel free to write it in the comments. Subscribe to the channel and don't forget to like this video. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video. Bye bye.